Hi, Michelle Glass here. Welcome back to another one of our Chapter 27, Lecture 27 series. This is actually our final episode, so pretty short. What we're looking at with this particular video is the balance of pH in the body. So we do want to make sure to remind ourselves about a few things related to the pH scale. Remember that a pH of 7 is considered to be neutral, and this is based on the normal dissociation of water molecule into hydrogen ion and hydroxide ion. Any pH value that's less than 7 to 0, so 0 to 6.99, is considered to be acidic and is going to have a low concentration of hydrogen ion. So we can talk about that as having a low pH. Any numbers greater than 7 up to 14 are considered to be either basic or alkaline. Those terms are used to mean the same thing. So we can say a high pH value means that you're basic or alkaline, and in this case you have a higher concentration of hydroxide ion and a low amount of hydrogen ion. So as we're looking at the regulation of pH, we're really going to be tracing the movement of hydrogen ion. So a high pH has a small amount of hydrogen ion compared to a low pH. Okay, we also should know the pH of our blood. Is slightly basic at 7.35 to 7.45. In the past, we've had an exam question on our departmental final about the pH of the blood. So it does benefit you to know this range. If you are less than 7.35, that is considered to be too acidic for your blood. So it's a condition called acidemia, and that's going to cause the physiological changes known as acidosis. So the term acidosis is talking about the physiological result of acidemia. The reverse of this is alkalemia, which is happening if your pH is higher than 7.45, and this would cause the physiological condition called alkalosis. Now, these should be prevented by buffer systems as well as regulated by the respiratory and the urinary system so that we don't have large changes in pH happening in our bodies. So let's talk a little bit about what buffers are, because they're going to be an important way that we will regulate pH. Now, a buffer is usually a weak acid or a weak base. The weak designation means that the acidic molecule will dissociate. Remember, that means to separate. So buffers can temporarily store hydrogen ion or release hydrogen ion as needed. Carbonic acid is one that we've talked about in the past. Carbonic acid is a weak acid. It dissociates into hydrogen ion and bicarbonate ion. It's weak because it's reversible. So that means not only can it separate or disassociate, but it can come back together as carbonic acid. So this is how it can store the hydrogen ion or release the hydrogen ion as needed. Now, the direction of the reaction is driven based on the conditions. So if your levels of hydrogen ion are high, then it's driving the reaction such that hydrogen pairs with bicarbonate ion to make carbonic acid. So instead of having a lot of loose H+, you end up with a lot of carbonic acid. The reverse of this is happening when conditions are more basic, when the pH is higher. So if you don't have enough hydrogen ions, you are pushing the reaction in the direction of dissociation. So now you are releasing hydrogen ion into the body fluids. And so carbonic acid is going to be a very important buffer in our body system. Other buffers include phosphate buffer. This is going to be primarily inside the cell, so part of the ICF buffer system. And proteins can act as important buffer systems. We've actually seen this. Hemoglobin was used as a buffer in the red blood cell when we talked about transporting carbon dioxide gas. Amino acids are weak acids, so they can act as buffer systems both inside and outside of the cell. And plasma proteins are floating around in the bloodstream, so clearly this is a buffer system in the extracellular fluid in the plasma. That whole mechanism of carbonic acid dissociating into hydrogen and bicarbonate ion, this system is the most important buffer system in the extracellular fluid, and it will be really the focus of our presentation today when we're talking about buffers. There are 3 different categories of acids that we'll see in the body, and the significance here is really, if you're looking at treatment for acidosis, you need to know, like, what is the cause, what kind of acids are we making, and then how can we address that particular problem. A fixed acid is typically just removed by the kidney, and it's produced from the breakdown of amino acids, phospholipids, and nucleic acids. So this is a common thing that's happening, and it's a common thing that's being removed by the kidney, so it shouldn't be causing too much imbalance or problems. Metabolic acids are going to be byproducts of metabolism, so we'll see the production of pyruvic acid and lactic acid when our skeletal muscle is working at its peak level of activity. Do you remember that from AMP1? Also, ketone bodies when we're in the post-absorptive state and we're digesting fatty acids, instead of glucose, and digesting ketones as well. These are usually metabolized and don't typically build up in the body to cause problem. Remember we talked about the liver processing lactic acid, turning it back to pyruvic acid, and then using that to make glucose or to make ATP. So typically we see that the body just takes it and uses it, and it's not causing a problem, but sometimes it does. And then volatile acids are gases. So this is carbon dioxide gas. And so we have talked about this, actually. We've talked about CO2 combining with water to make carbonic acid, which we just talked about as separating into hydrogen and bicarbonate ion. So clearly CO2 is going to be an important contributor to the pH of your blood, because CO2 is constantly diffusing into the blood, but we can just exhale it out and get rid of it that way. So CO2 really is going to be the most important when we're talking about regulation of pH in the body. So remember, a high partial pressure of CO2 means that we have a low pH, it's acidic, we have a lot of hydrogen ion. So we will see this inverse relationship between partial pressure of carbon dioxide gas and pH. Okay, so we've already said that there's 3 ways that we can regulate pH. Buffer systems, focusing in on that carbonic acid bicarbonate ion system. The respiratory system, so we can get rid of that volatile acid production just by either breathing out CO2 or slowing down our respirations and retaining CO2. And then the kidney cells will actually can secrete hydrogen ion, and they can generate and reabsorb bicarbonate ions. So they're going to be important in maintaining a good bicarbonate ion reserve. Okay, so in this drawing here, I've drawn my alveoli, so that's my lung, and my blood, and my extracellular fluid. And in the extracellular fluid, you have a huge bicarbonate ion reserve, and typically that HCO3 minus is pairing up with all of that Na plus, all of that sodium ion that's already there in solution. So we're forming their sodium bicarbonate. Now, if we have an elevated hydrogen ion concentration in the blood, then what we're going to see happening is the bicarbonate ion from our extracellular fluid will move into the bloodstream. It will simply pair with a hydrogen ion to make carbonic acid. That carbonic acid is being transported through the bloodstream. When we get to the lung, we're going to convert it into water and CO2, and we're going to exhale the CO2 and be left with water. So no big deal. So this is how the respiratory system is going to really be important in helping to regulate our pH. We can just exhale our extra CO2, and this is a way of actually getting rid of acid. The arrows are going to go in the opposite direction when our hydrogen ion levels are low. So you're going to slow down your respirations, retain CO2, combine it with water to make carbonic acid. Carbonic acid will dissociate into hydrogen ion and bicarbonate ion, which will just go back into our bicarbonate ion reserves. Now, the kidney is also going to be important in helping to regulate pH. So we will see along the whole length of the nephron, the PCT, the DCT, and the collecting duct, that we are going to get hydrogen ion secretion and bicarbonate ion reabsorption. So H plus is leaving, bicarbonate ion is being reabsorbed. Kidney is also helping to remove a little bit of CO2 by combining it with water to make that carbonic acid and then using that to make more bicarbonate ion. So we're actually generating bicarbonate ion here at the kidney. Don't forget that there's co-transport of sodium and bicarbonate ion that's happening here, as well as co-transport or exchange with sodium and hydrogen ion. So remember, we've talked about how potassium imbalance and pH imbalance can be linked, and we'll see that some drugs turn off the sodium, potassium, and sodium hydrogen ion exchange pump. So sometimes if you're having trouble regulating your sodium levels, maybe because of medication, then you might see a pH imbalance showing up for that reason as well. Now here, that sodium hydrogen ion exchange pump is just at the DCT. So let's just remember that. Okay, so we have actually two types of acidosis, and they're really named based on the cause. So respiratory acidosis is where you have a high partial pressure of carbon dioxide gas, so that means you have a low pH, so your bloodstream is more acidic than it should be. And this can be caused by hypoventilation, so you're not exchanging enough CO2 with your atmosphere. This is the most common problem that can cause a pH imbalance. So what will happen here is simply you have chemoreceptors in the atrium and in the cerebrospinal fluid that are going to be stimulated. They will increase your respiratory rates, so just get more of that CO2 out into the atmosphere. You will see the kidney secreting hydrogen ion and reabsorbing bicarbonate ion, so you're increasing your buffer system. And so you're going to be recruiting all these buffers to help you trap the extra CO2, and by saying that, I really mean the extra hydrogen ion. Metabolic acidosis is the second most common, and here we see really it's a different cause. If you are looking at this from a clinical perspective, you're going to see the same kind of symptoms and the same kinds of body responses, but they have different causes, and so you would need to identify what the cause is in order to give treatment. One cause of metabolic acidosis is the production of lactic acid, or so lactic acidosis or ketoacidosis. Lactic acidosis could happen, at the end of a marathon because you've been working that muscle to peak level and you're going to get a buildup of lactic acid. Ketoacidosis can happen, just to a small extent in the post-absorptive state when you're breaking down lipids and ketones, but can also be caused from starvation. The metabolic acidosis can be caused by a kidney that's damaged and it's not excreting hydrogen ion, or if you're taking diuretics and that's interfering with your ability to excrete hydrogen ion. And then chronic diarrhea can also cause an excess bicarbonate ion excretion, which can then mess up your buffer systems. So you might see that too. But basically the responses from the body are the same no matter what the cause is. Respiratory alkalosis is going to be where you have a decrease in your carbon dioxide gas, so you are maintaining it or keeping it in the body, and you are not, and you have an elevated pH. So in this case, it could be caused by hyperventilation, which, usually we get a signal to stop and the body sort of corrects. When we are correcting for respiratory alkalosis, we have those same chemoreceptors responding, and this time we're just basically going to reverse everything. So we decrease our respiratory rate, retain some of that CO2. The kidney can actually generate for us hydrogen ion and secrete the bicarbonate ion. So you're pushing your reactions in the opposite direction, and we can have buffer systems besides bicarbonate ion helping to replace that hydrogen ion that we need. And again, we can also have metabolic alkalosis, which is rare. And what's happening here, again, is related to it's basically going to look the same way as the respiratory alkalosis, but the cause is different. So we do get these like small little alkaline tides that happen regularly as we are increasing our bicarbonate ion reabsorption at the gastrointestinal tract during meals. So this is like a normal thing that our body has to deal with. But metabolic alkalosis can also be caused by excessive vomiting. So that can be a source here. But again, the body is responding the same way that we saw to the respiratory alkalosis. And that is it.